All right, students. So now we're going to do 1.3. So 1.3, again, we can go to Google Classroom, we can go to classwork, we can go down on daily work, go down to 1.3, types of pathogens. So there are two assignments for types of pathogens. There's 1.3a and then there's 1.3. We in class we did 1.3a first, but you really don't, it's not going to help you very much to do this one first if you weren't here that day, but it's okay. So the first thing that you're going to do is first you're going to read these statements. And again, if you want to translate them, there is space here for you to translate. So the first one here says viral infections caused by viruses, can be treated with antibiotics. So before we have learned anything, what I want you to think is, what do you know? So maybe you have heard of antibiotics before. Maybe you have taken antibiotics before when you are sick. Do you think that they can be used to treat viral infections? Do you think if you think true, you think yes, you circle true. If you don't, if you think it's false, if you don't think that it's false, you think it's true. If you don't think it's true, you circle false. What about this one? So vaccines, we have all received vaccines to be in school. So are there vaccines only for viruses or for bacteria? Or is it for both? Or is it for neither? What do you think? Is it true or false that there are only vaccines for viruses and not bacteria? Then lastly, it says some bacteria are helpful, right? So we know that bacteria, right? Bacteria are things that can make us sick. Are there bacteria that can be helpful for us? What do you think? You can circle true or false. When we finish doing the assignment, then we're going to come back and we're going to write the correct answers after. We're going to see if we were right. So we'll go back to 1.3 then. Again, if you want to write the translation, please write the translation for viruses and bacteria. And also the questions here. We're going to answer, we're going to learn about both of these, about viruses and bacteria, and then we're going to fill out this information. So again, please write the translation here if that will help you. To answer these questions, you're going to use the information from 1.3 types of pathogens. So you go back to 1.3 and there's types of pathogens. So pathogens, and maybe you have heard this word before, maybe not. A pathogen is something that makes you sick. So we're going to talk about two major types of pathogens. So there are these things called viruses and these things called bacteria. So you have probably heard of these before, maybe or maybe not. But there are two things, viruses and bacteria. And we want to answer some questions about them. So first, let's look at what does this pathogen infect? So what becomes infected by a pathogen? What can be made? What can get sick from a virus and from a bacteria? So let's go through this list here. Let's see. So here here it says viruses can infect humans, plants, animals, and even bacteria. So a virus is something that can infect a lot of different things: a human, a plant, an animal, and a bacteria. So what we can write here for what does this pathogen infect? Well, we know that it infects humans, plants, animals, and bacteria. Right? There are many different things that are infected by viruses. The next question is, how is this pathogen transmitted into the human body? So how does somebody get sick with the virus? How does somebody get a virus into their body? So, right, one example of a virus is a coronavirus, right? So how does somebody get sick? So it says here, if we go through the slides, viruses are transmitted to humans through the skin, blood, lungs, and intestines. So when there are viruses like coronavirus, for example, if you have like a cut on your skin, right, if you are bleeding or something, right, a virus can actually go into there, right, through your skin or through your blood, through your lungs, right. So you can inhale. If you inhale a virus, so like coronavirus was an infection of the respiratory system, so of your lungs. So you can breathe it in, and also your intestines. So if you eat something that has a sickness in it, right, that could also make you sick. So they can be transmitted to humans through the skin, blood, lungs, and intestines. So I'm going to put for the way that it's transmitted through the skin, the blood, lungs, and intestines. So that's how it can come into my body. That's how it can make me sick. How does this pathogen propagate? So propagate is like, right, when you first get sick, there's some amount of pathogen, but eventually, right, when you first get sick, right, you get sick a lot, and then it decreases. So how does that sickness get worse first? So what's happening? So in order for them to propagate, in order for it to reproduce, to create more copies, it uses what's called a host. So you, in this case, right, when a virus goes into your body, the virus is using the cells in your body, to make copies of itself. And so we say that you are a host. You are literally, and so you are an organism, you are a living being. The virus is reproducing itself inside of you. So viruses cannot reproduce by themselves because they are not alive. Viruses are not alive. They have DNA, but they're not alive. It's very interesting. But so what they need to do is they need to find a host. They need to find a plant, an animal, a plant, an animal, a human, or a bacteria to infect so that it can propagate. So it's going to require a host. So here we're going to it will requires a host. It will need a host to propagate. The next question is, how does this pathogen cause disease? So when the pathogen is inside of us, so how does a virus make us sick? Well, that's a good question. Let's see. So viruses carry a small amount of genetic information in a container called a capsid. When they infect cells, they release their genetic material into the host cell. The virus uses the machinery of the cell to replicate itself and propagate copies into other copies. Okay. Usually the virus will destroy the host cell, which causes the host to experience a disease. Right. So we learned before, right, that viruses will use the machinery, the things inside of a cell, to make many copies of itself. So viruses do not know, right? They're not alive. They are not thinking. So they make so many copies of themselves that eventually the cell just cannot hold them anymore, and the cell just is destroyed. When your cells are destroyed, right, you start to feel the illness. You start to feel sick. So what's happening, right, is that the virus will destroy the host cell, and that's what's going to cause you to feel the disease. When the virus has replicated itself so much that now many of your cells are destroyed. So destroy the host cell, right? So the cells inside of your body are literally becoming destroyed because this virus is making so many copies of itself. Okay. How do you treat this pathogen? So how do we treat a virus? So normally, or usually, right? So usually you can so if you have ever gotten the flu before or have gotten coronavirus, right? Usually you do not have to take any medication. Usually you will heal by yourself. However, you can also take something called an antiviral. So anti means against and viral, right? Like a virus. So it goes against viruses. These help our body. So an antiviral is something that we can take that will help our body destroy viruses. So one thing we can take to help is we can take an antiviral. Antivirals. Antivirals are how we can treat or by itself or by itself, like waiting, basically. You can usually wait. Sometimes, right? Sometimes it's serious, sometimes not. What can you do to prevent this pathogen, right? So we try not to get sick. So what is something you probably have done this many times, but you can take what's called a vaccine. So a vaccine, they give you an injection in your arm. And of course, you can always look at pictures of these things. A vaccine, they give you these in your arms, usually. And you go to the doctor and they give you a vaccine. The vaccine, what it does is it helps protect you from the virus. So then what it does is it gives you a form of the virus that is weak. And that way your body is like, I have this weak virus. I will learn what it is like so that if I ever get sick for real, I know how to fight it. So you can prevent this with the vaccine. Vaccines are good ways to do that. And so what are some examples of viruses? So you may already know some examples, but here are some other examples here. So like influenza, coronavirus, HPV. These are different kinds of diseases you may have learned about before. You can look these up too if you don't know about them, or you can look up other viruses. Another common form of virus, or not very common, but HIV. So HIV is a sexually transmitted disease, and it can cause you to become really sick. But those are all different kinds. So there's coronavirus, there's the flu, or right, influenza. The flu, influenza is the same thing as the flu. We are very lazy in English and we like to make shorter words. And also HIV or HPV, any of these things. These are all some diseases that are caused by viruses. What about bacteria? So let's learn about bacteria now. So, right, viruses are not alive, right? Viruses need to infect something else so that they can reproduce. Bacteria are a little different. So it says bacteria are living organisms with only a single cell. So they're only one. So this right here, this is one bacteria. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it looks like maybe 6, 7 bacteria. Right. So these are all different. These are all bacteria, and they are actually alive, and they can reproduce very quickly. There are actually tons of bacteria that are around us and inside of us. Bacteria are actually not all harmful. Some bacteria are harmful, but a lot of bacteria are also really, really helpful. We actually cannot live without bacteria. There are many bacteria that are good, and some of them are bad. But bacteria, they exist everywhere. They exist in all of the things that are alive. They exist in plants and animals and humans. They don't exist inside of viruses because again, viruses are not real. They're not real, or they're not alive. But plants, animals, and humans can all be infected by a virus. So here we'll put plants, animals, and humans. Right? We can all get bacterial infections. The next question is, so how is it transmitted into the human body? So how does somebody get sick with a bacteria? Well, similarly, right? So anytime you eat or drink something, or anytime you touch something, or you have like a cut on your skin, all of those things can make you sick. So it can be from your skin, your mouth, your nose, insects, food, right? So any kind of opening in your body, a bacteria can come inside. So I will skin, mouth, nose, insects, food. Skin, mouth. So mouth is kind of like this. It's not quite the same as intestines, but like, right, your intestines are inside of your body. So skin, mouth, nose, which is the same as your kind of like, right, your nose goes to your lungs. Insects. So insects, right? They bite you and they take blood. So that's the same. It's kind of the same thing as blood. And food, right? Your intestines, things that you eat. How does a bacteria propagate? So maybe you have maybe eaten food sometimes where the food gets old. When the food gets old, right, and you see this kind of like gross stuff that grows on your food. These are actually bacteria. So these are bacteria. They literally eat the food that you leave. Like the reason that it goes bad is because bacteria are like, oh, well, if you're not going to eat it, I'm going to eat it. So they use the resources from your body. So if they're inside you, they use the resources inside your body, right? You eat. Whenever you eat, they're like, ah, look at all this free food. I will eat it. Same as if you leave them on, right? If you have like old food, they will grow on the old food because they're like, well, if you're not going to eat it, I'm going to eat it. So they will use resources from the surroundings, resources from your body, resources from the environment and from the body. How does this pathogen cause disease? So what do bacteria do that cause the disease? Well, right, because bacteria, right, these are here bacteria and these are your host cells. Bacteria, again, they do not go inside of your host cells, but bacteria are like, all this free food around here, we are going to eat it. So that means that your body cells now, they don't have any food. They don't have any food to eat. So that your cells, your body's cells that normally would eat the food that you eat now don't have anything to eat, so they die. So when you have these bacteria, they will disrupt the function of your body cells. They will not allow your cells to function correctly, and they will kill the cells and tissues. So you can write this in many ways, but they disrupt the function of your cells by eating all of the food. Basically, they'll eat all the food, all the resources in your body, and will leave nothing for your other cells, so they die. The cells will die because they do not have any food. How do we treat this pathogen? Well, you have probably taken this before. It's called an antibiotic. So an antibiotic, so bio means life, right? And we know that bacteria are alive. So an antibiotic is something that kills these living bacteria. You have probably taken this before. So antibiotics, they are very common to take, but there are many different kinds of them. A pretty common one is penicillin. So you may have taken penicillin before. Penicillin. I'm not sure it's different in different languages, but you can take usually you take this when you have you will take this when you have a bacteria that is infecting you. So we'll put here for a bacteria, we will put that these are called antibiotics. So if you have a bacterial infection, you almost always have to take antibiotics. Sometimes no, but usually almost always you should take antibiotics. But regardless, you should go talk to your doctor, ask your doctor instead. Let's see. So how do you treat this? So we know we treat it with antibiotics. How do we prevent them? So is there a way to prevent us from getting sick in the first place? Well, let's see. So it turns out there are actually also vaccines for bacteria. So some bacterial infections, we also have vaccines for them as well. So you can also prevent these with vaccines. Obviously, right, you can eat healthy and whatnot, but vaccines are very helpful to prevent bacterial disease. And usually, so when you came to the US, you took certain vaccines probably. In your home country, you probably had different vaccines because there are different diseases that are common in different areas. What are some examples of some bacterial diseases? So you may have seen some of these before. So for example, if you ever had strep throat before, we can look up an image of strep throat. It's not very fun to see, but sometimes right? People have like your tonsils. Your tonsils will get very inflamed. It really, really hurts your throat. It hurts really, really bad. I had this a few years ago, and it really, really hurts to like to eat or to drink things. It's very, very painful. So strep throat is one of them. What else is there? Let's see. Well, we have food poisoning. So maybe sometimes you eat food and it like just feels really bad. Food poisoning. So that means it's like when you eat something, right? And like you almost you have like it just hurts really bad, right? Sometimes you throw up, sometimes it gives you diarrhea. You just feel really, really bad. That's from these are from bacteria. So food poisoning, right? It's not an actual poison because it doesn't kill you, but it can make you very sick. Ear infection. So sometimes where you get an ear infection, sometimes um some people actually put garlic in there, but right, it's like when your ear really, really hurts, they'll put garlic in there. And the reason that they put garlic is because garlic actually has some antibiotics in it. So it actually can help treat this. So you can put ear infection. And there are many other types. So you can look at these, right? Urinary tract infections. Sometimes when you go to the restroom, it hurts a lot. It hurts a lot to go to the restroom. This tends to happen more in people who people with uh different so it happens both in every kind of person, but people who have vaginas tend to have urinary tract infections more common than people who do not have vaginas. um but your urinary tract infection is another kind of urinary tract infection. It's not that important, but it's just, maybe it will be helpful for you to see. But yeah, these are basically the information that we want to see. Now let's go back here. So let's see if our answer is right. So it says first, viral infections can be treated with antibiotics. So let's go here. So to treat viral infections, viruses, we use antivirals or we wait. So we do not, this is false. We do not use antibiotics when we have a virus. If you have a virus, do not take antibiotics. It will not help you. They do not, right? Antibiotics only treat things that are alive. Viruses are alive, or viruses are not alive, rather. Bacteria are alive. So what we can write as evidence after you read. So where did you find this answer? Well, let's go inside this slide. So where do we see? Here it says that, right, bacterial infections can be treated with antibiotics. This is correct, right? But not viruses, only bacteria. So bacterial infections can be treated using antibiotics. Let's make this smaller so that you can actually see it. So here's the evidence. This is how I know that this is a false statement. There are only vaccines for viral infections and not bacterial infections. Well, let's look back here. So how do you prevent this pathogen? Well, to prevent viruses, you use a vaccine. What about to prevent a bacteria? You also can use vaccines. There are different kinds of vaccines, but there are vaccines for both. So this is false. This is false. So we can put here, right? There are vaccines for viruses and bacteria. The last statement here is some bacteria are helpful. So most people, when you hear the word bacteria, maybe it makes you think of something that is bad, something that's going to make you sick. And that is true. Some bacteria are harmful, but a lot of them are actually very, very helpful. Again, we need bacteria to help us do all the things that we need to do. We cannot digest our food without bacteria. Plants cannot get energy from the sun, cannot grow without bacteria. Animals cannot eat plants, cannot do all the things that they do to provide us with food without bacteria. So bacteria are actually really, really helpful sometimes. Not all of them are helpful. It is important to know that not all of them are helpful. Some of them are actually really, really important, and we need to keep them. That's why it's not a good idea to always just take antibiotics, because antibiotics will kill the bacteria. We need a lot of that bacteria. A lot of the bacteria is actually really helpful. So this statement here is true. Some bacteria are helpful. Not all of them are harmful. And that takes us to the end of 1.3. Great job, students. See you soon.